Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
You can tell a lot about where a company is going by looking at where it's been. ConocoPhillips, Alaska's oil and gas company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov, get any updates to our forecasts or watches, warnings, advisories that we may have out. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on both Twitter and on Facebook. Starting off, we'll take a quick look at our warnings out for the area. Only two right now, but up along the Beaufort Sea coast, we have two blizzard warnings out. Out west, there's one east of Dead Horse that's going to be out until midnight tonight. Then along the eastern Beaufort Sea, we have one out until noon tomorrow. So expect both of those to have pretty bad conditions with visibility, snow, and strong winds out there. As we take a look at our satellite imagery, our main low pressure system is south of the Aleutian Islands right now, and that is bringing in a lot of cloud cover and some precipitation along the Aleutian Islands, extending up towards the Alaska Peninsula. As you watch this, you can see a long fetch of warm air coming up with it, which is bringing some of that precipitation as rain. But further to the north, a lot of cold air still dominating the area, so we are seeing a lot of snow up there. Taking a look out over mainland Alaska, we have our diminishing low pressure system out in the eastern Gulf that's bringing in some cloud cover to areas of the Panhandle, some areas of snow with that. However, over the majority of the state, not seeing a whole lot of activity until we get up along the Arctic coast, where once again, we're having a lot of cloud cover due to the blizzard conditions that we're seeing along the Beaufort Sea there. So as we look at our forecast starting way off in the east, our low is bringing in some snow to areas, especially in the southern and coastal sides of the southeast part of the state. And then as we move up towards the south central, not a whole lot of activity in terms of precipitation. As we move into the interior, similar story, but as we get up along the Arctic coast, extending all the way out to the Barrow area, we are going to see some snow out there. However, the blowing snow conditions will be further off to the east. As we drop down the west coast of the state, not a whole lot of activity till we get to the YK Delta, and we are going to have some snow extending up towards the McGrath area. And then down in the Bristol Bay area, some isolated snow showers there for the rest of today. Out in the Bering Sea, some snow showers around the Pribilofs, but not a whole lot of activity until we get down to our main low pressure system that's bringing up that southerly air and a lot of rain with that, mixing with snow for the eastern Aleutian Islands. However, the central Aleutian Islands should be seeing primarily rain. And as we move into the night hours, that rain is going to continue for the central Aleutians, becoming mixed with snow as we get further off to the east, although that rain snow line has pushed further to the north and east as that warmer air continues to come up from the south. Then in the Bering Sea, some snow around the Pribilofs remaining, and the Bristol Bay area extending all the way up the west coast to western parts of the Seward Peninsula. Up along the Point Hope area, extending up towards just to the west of Barrow, we're going to see some snow all throughout tonight. And then our conditions of the snow continuing along the Arctic coastline, especially out east where that blowing snow and blizzard conditions will continue for places in the eastern Beaufort Sea area. Down in northern parts of the interior, not a whole lot of precipitation, but in the Eagle area and down around the Alaska Range, you're going to see some isolated snow showers there, and a chance of isolated snow showers for much of the south central as well. Down in the Panhandle area, you're going to see snow continuing, even though that low has really started to diminish and pretty much dissipated at this point throughout the night. And as we look into Wednesday, our frontal system with our main low is now extending out into the Gulf of Alaska, bringing that warmer air up from the south, a mix of rain and snow now for southern parts of the Panhandle, purely snow as we get to the north and extending out towards Yakutat. However, in the south central, that precipitation not quite making it there on Wednesday. This high pressure is continuing to keep that pushed further to the south. However, as we get up towards Eagle and then towards Fort Yukon as well, some isolated snow showers expected throughout the day on Wednesday. Then in the morning hours out to the east along the Arctic coast, blowing snow and blizzard conditions continuing till about noon. But we are going to see some snow for places further to the west as well, extending down towards the western parts of the Kotzebue Sound area. Western parts of the Norton Sound area as well, going to see some isolated snow showers extending down into the Yukon Delta. However, Kuskokwim Delta going to see some blowing snow, but not going to see any new fresh snow, just the snow that was there overnight going to get blown around a little bit with some stronger winds in the area. So you look at our main low pressure, that is going to bring up those conditions further to the north, mix of rain and snow for the eastern Aleutian Islands, becoming all snow as we get into the Alaska Peninsula over towards Kodiak as well. In the Bering Sea, going to continue to see snow throughout the day on Wednesday and some isolated rain showers as we get into the central Aleutian Islands, nothing way out west towards Shemya. Taking a look now into Thursday, some rain finally approaching the Shemya area, going to get closer throughout the day. Isolated snow showers for the central Aleutian Islands and central Bering Sea, mixing with rain in the eastern Aleutian Islands. And as our frontal system pushes further to the north, bringing in a lot of moisture, some snow to areas along the Alaska Peninsula. Throughout the day on Thursday, especially into Thursday night, this is going to continue to push further to the north, bringing a lot of snow throughout areas of Bristol Bay area into the YK Delta. Not a whole lot of activity through much of the interior with the exception way out to the west near the St. Lawrence area. We are going to see some isolated snow showers there, and way up in the northeast corner of the state near Barter Island, some isolated snow there as well. However, our main frontal system hugging the Gulf coastline, extending down into the Panhandle area. Some rain starting to develop in the way southern parts with that strong fetch of warm air behind it. Becoming snow in the northern parts in the Juneau area further to the north as well, all the way along the coastline, extending into the south central areas, Anchorage Bowl area, all of the Kenai Peninsula and down near Kodiak as well. And as that pushes further to the north as well, going to extend further inland, especially over Thursday night, and the potential for that to start to mix with rain there as well. Switching gears, we'll take a look at temperatures. Starting in the southeast, primarily in the teens, a little bit colder near Haines, 10 degrees there. A little bit warmer as we get further to the south, 24 for Ketchikan, 27 for Sitka. Taking a look now at the south central, coldest temperatures inland, minus 21 degrees Gulkana this afternoon. Warmer along the coastline, getting as high as 20 degrees for Homer. Even warmer down for Kodiak, 28 degrees there. As we move into the interior, most locations below zero. Eagle at minus 10, Northway minus 15. Colder as we get further to the north. Arctic Village, coldest in the state this afternoon, minus 42 degrees. And right around zero all along the Arctic coast. Dead Horse down to minus 4 degrees with Barrow and Wainwright up at 5 degrees there. So we move in the Kotzebue Sound area below zero in the eastern parts. Single digits as we get further to the west. Shishmaref 3 degrees there. Norton Sound area above zero this afternoon, 5 degrees at Nome. Taking us down into the southwest part of the state. Temperatures primarily around 30 degrees for much of the YK Delta area. Colder at Antioch, 16 degrees there. 28 degrees for Bethel, and then down in the Bristol Bay area, colder as we get further inland. Iliamna 18 degrees, Dillingham 21 degrees. Alaska Peninsula getting up into the mid-30s there, with Cold Bay getting to 35 degrees. And as we move along the Aleutian Islands into the mid-40s, the highest, 45 degrees for Atka. Colder for the Pribilofs, 35 for St. Paul, 34 for St. George. Taking a look now at our lows for tonight, dropping down just below 40 degrees along the Aleutian Islands, dropping down just below 30 degrees for the Pribilofs. As we look into the southwest part of the state, in the single digits, some places getting a little bit colder, especially the more inland locations below zero there. Bethel getting down to minus 2 degrees tonight. As we move up to the Seward Peninsula area, getting below zero for most locations there as well. Nome getting down to minus 6. Shishmaref staying a little bit warmer, 9 degrees there. Up along the Arctic coast, most places staying below zero. However, we are going to see Barter Island only get down to 2 degrees for tonight. In the interior, temperatures staying well below zero. Fairbanks dropping down to minus 31 degrees. Arctic Village is going to stay right around that. Mark that it's at now, getting up to about 37 degrees. And then down in the south central, getting below zero for most locations until we get along the coastline. A little bit warmer there. Cordova only getting down to about 14 degrees, 12 degrees for Homer. Down in the southeast part of the state, temperatures varying quite a bit. Pretty cold up north, getting down to 4 degrees near Haines. Only getting down to about 24 for Ketchikan. As we take a look into the highs for tomorrow, getting up past 30 degrees as we get further to the south. staying pretty cold near Haines, only getting up to around 16 degrees there, with Juneau getting up to 23 degrees tomorrow. In the south central, temperatures getting up above zero for most locations, with the exception of Gocana, going to stay below zero, only getting up to around -10 tomorrow. Pretty big difference from down near Kodiak, getting up all the way to 30 degrees there. And then in the interior, temperatures staying below zero, with Fairbanks getting up to -18 degrees, Bettles getting up to -15. Along the Arctic coast, getting into the single digits for most locations there. A little bit warmer along the coastline as we move down the western part of the state, getting into the teens, with Nome getting up to 13 degrees tomorrow. Similarly in the southwest along the coastline, a little bit warmer. Dillingham getting up to 12, King Salmon getting up to 14 degrees. And then in the Aleutian Islands, breaking the 40 mark, getting up into those lower 40s there. St. Paul only getting up to around 32 degrees for a high tomorrow. Switching gears, going into the aviation forecast, widespread MVFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea extending along the Aleutian Islands. We have some IFR conditions with that frontal system that's going to be approaching the Aleutian Islands, starting to make its way into the Alaska Peninsula. And then way up along the northeastern part of the state with those blizzard conditions early on, we are expecting to see IFR conditions there as well. Way down in the Panhandle, going to see some MVFR conditions with the snow that is expected there. Taking a look at the passes now, going to see a similar trend with a lot of what we saw in the last chart. Not a whole lot of activity, a lot of VFR conditions. Anaktuvik is one of those places. Adigan Pass also VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill both expected to be VFR for tomorrow, as well as Rainy Pass and Windy Pass. Isabel Pass also expected to be VFR throughout the day. Mentasta Pass expected to be VFR as well. Tanita Pass, VFR conditions expected, as well as at Portage. Chilkoot and White will both start off VFR, but then become marginal VFR as we move throughout the day tomorrow. Taking a look at our freezing level, in the southern parts of the Panhandle extending up along the eastern Gulf Coast, our freezing line comes just to the south of Kodiak Island and extends out into the eastern Bering Sea through the northern Bering Sea and then out towards Russia. We can see some warmer air coming up from the south behind that warm front, extending now towards the Alaska Peninsula. And then my button clicker does not seem to be working. There we go. Moving on towards our icing. We have icing conditions extending from the Panhandle across the Gulf of Alaska into the Alaska Peninsula, way out in the east between 1,000 and 8,000 feet. In the south, that's going to be a little bit lower. In the north, it's going to be a little bit higher. And as we move out towards Kodiak Island, above 3,000 feet there and above 7,000 feet over the Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at our jet stream now, coming up from the southwest, 110 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, then shooting out over the Panhandle, about 130 knots there. Northern part of the state dominated by high pressure, not going to see a whole lot of activity. Out over the Bering Sea out of a northwesterly direction, 80 knots there. Main part of the jet staying well to our south, about 135 knots extending out over the northern Pacific. Dropping us down to 9,000 feet, we have flow out over the northern part of the state in northeasterly direction, 25 to 30 knots there. Coming out of a northerly direction over the Bering Sea up to as high as 30 knots there. As we look out over the Gulf of Alaska, our strongest part of the flow at this level, 45 knots staying just to the south of the coastline and then going over the Panhandle, getting up to as high as 50 knots, exiting out into Canada. It does drop down pretty quickly as we get over the state, down to 10 to 15 knots over southern parts of Alaska. Then down to 3,000 feet, our flow out of a southwesterly direction over the Gulf. Highest is well to our south, 60 knots there, but still going to be around 30 knots as we get over southern parts of the Panhandle. You're going to see some light chop associated with that. Over mainland Alaska, flow primarily out of a northerly direction, becoming northeasterly over the southwest, getting up to as high as 30 knots there, expecting some turbulence with the interaction of the terrain there. And then out over the Bering Sea, going over the Aleutian Islands, northeasterly flow as high as 45 knots, bringing in some turbulence to those areas as well. Taking a look now at our turbulence chart, extending from the western Aleutian Islands out towards the Alaska Peninsula, we are seeing some turbulence below 4,000 feet there. And then as we get over the southwest part of the state, the YK Delta extending into the lower Yukon Valley below 4,000 feet there. And then way out in the southeast part of the state, below 5,000 feet, primarily located in the very southern part of the Panhandle. And if you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Another area where the Federal Aviation Administration is using technology in advancing aviation safety is in the use of remote weather cameras as a tool to aid pilots in making safe flight decisions. Hello, I'm Sheila Balistreri.
So in '99, we really started what we currently call the Alaska Weather Camera Program. We say Alaska because it's the only place in the FAA that has this. One, it's available through the internet so that the pilots, their family, their friends, they can all take a look at what the weather's like before you go there. In addition, we have all of that available within all of our flight service stations so that each flight service station technician can call up and look at weather real time. And with that, provide a better briefing, whether it's pre-flight or in-flight, for the pilots. By far the most popular thing we've ever done.
The weather camera system has been a good one. I'm sure you can tell from the, if you had access to the number of hits that they get that, on each site, that they're well used, and they save a lot of gasoline, they save a lot of time for passengers out turning around in weather and coming back when a pilot can just look at the camera and make a decision based on that rather than going out and actually looking at the weather.
When we look at the cameras, and if it's a definite no-go situation, then we're not able, we don't send an airplane out to take a look at it and then have to just spend the gas and the time and energy to go out, take a look at it, and just turn around and come back.
By placing weather cameras throughout the state, we've certainly come a long way. Today, we have 55 cameras throughout the state, an investment of $7 million. 12 new sites are scheduled to be up and running by this October. This concept, I think, is stunning in its simplicity. The pilot goes online and can view 2 images for each location. The first shows what the site would look like in a perfectly clear day situation. The second shows current weather conditions. Pilots can now learn what the visibility is in the mountain pass they face and whether they want to fly through it before they take off. In many instances, they may decide not to fly, to hold on that flight for a while, depending upon what they see. And that's long before they set foot in the aircraft.
Alaska is a huge state, and the area covered so far by weather cams is comparatively small. In order for the project to be completed, 165 already identified sites need to be added. In what may be considered counterintuitive, many of these weather cameras are not placed at airports, but are positioned in or near mountain passes and other geographical areas, which are often used by pilots as navigational aids. Others are located at rural airports where there are no weather observers or co-located with automated weather systems. Pilots report that the value in these weather cameras is the real-time information they receive about destination and route conditions. Flight service specialists also have access to the weather camera images and routinely brief pilots with the most up-to-date information before takeoff and during their flight.
We use the weather cams in 2 basic ways here at the flight service station. For self-briefing, to get ready to be able to brief the pilots, to look at the weather cam where we have an airport with a weather report. We can compare what we see on the screen with what the weather report says. Where we do not have weather reports available, then we can look at the camera and again get a picture of what the weather is like at those locations.
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is pull up the weather cameras to all the destinations in the Southeast and check that against the actual reports at that station, and it gives you a lot better picture of what the weather's doing than what we used to enjoy with just the observation. I'm sure all the pilots are doing the same thing. I know all of our pilots do. A well-placed camera looking in 3 different directions, there's nothing like that. Be able to see in real time what your weather actually looks like before you take off.
Cost benefit is quite a bit as far as saving us money. We don't launch a flight when we know that the weather is bad, when we can see it on the cameras that the weather is bad at our destination.
When the weather cam system was first proposed, there were some people who doubted its utility, and as they've come online, we've seen how the pilots really like to be able to see those pictures. They value it, and as they become available to us as briefers, we value it too.
I do thank you also for the cameras. I personally have used the cameras. I think that probably the one that's most used is the one over going through the pass into Lake Clark, and from time to time I get calls that it may not be functioning properly, which I'm pleased to say that Mr. Poe responds to very quickly.
During a recent independent study of Alaska pilots who have used the system, 68% reported making decisions to cancel or delay flights based on weather camera information. Pilots also reported that these decisions help them avoid additional fuel costs from flights that must be diverted or repeated due to bad weather. Now, these safety and economic advantages generated more than 2.3 million hits this past year on the FAA's Alaska WeatherCam website.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a quick look at our ice edge. As we can see, we have a lot of development over how it has been. We've been unseasonably warm, so we've had the ice edge holding off from its normal track. However, with the colder temperatures that we have been experiencing, starting to see that catch up to the norm. We also have some ice forming in the northern parts of Cook Inlet, so getting down further to the south now with those colder temperatures that we've been seeing throughout much of the state. Switching up, looking at our main marine forecast in the southeast part of the state. Winds pretty light for the most part, 15 to 20 knots, a little bit higher as we get further to the north out of a northerly direction, 25 knots up in the inside waters. And then out towards Yakutat out of the east, 25 knots there, expecting some higher gusts through some of the terrain along the coastline. Seas getting up to about as high as 9 feet. Then on Thursday, getting a little bit stronger out of a southwesterly direction up to as high as 35 knots. Out of the east still, further to the north, 30 knots there, and then in the inside waters, southeasterly flow 30 to 35, with the exception of up north, still out of the north at 40 knots there. Seas now getting up to as high as 19 feet in the eastern parts of the Gulf. Looking out over the south central flow out of a northeasterly direction, weakest up towards Prince William Sound, 15 knots there, getting up to as high as 35 knots as we get further to the south. Seas there getting up to as high as 10 feet, a little bit weaker as we get closer towards Cook Inlet, 3 to 5 feet there. Shelikof Strait seeing 8-foot seas on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, flow staying pretty much the same out of a northeasterly or easterly direction up to as high as 35 knots, switching up to the southeast parts of Kodiak Island. Out of the southeast there, 30 knots, 16-foot seas there, dropping down towards the Barren Islands around 9 feet and then picking back up to 15 to 16 feet as we get closer to Montague Island. Then in the southwest part of the state, around the Alaska Peninsula, northeasterly flow, 30 to 35 knots, strongest on the Pacific side. Seas getting up to as high as 10 feet on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, flow primarily staying out of a northerly direction, 30 to 35 knots, with the exception of closer to Kodiak Island out of a southeasterly direction, 30 knots there with 13 feet for seas. Then in the Aleutian Islands, out of a northeasterly direction, 30 to 40 knots for most locations. So get way out to the west northeasterly direction, 20 knots there with only 8-foot seas. Then as we move into Thursday, switching to become more southeasterly, 30 knots way out west. And then more northerly as we get further off to the east, all around 30 to 35 knots. Seas getting as high as 12 feet. Along the west coast of the state, northeasterly flow 20 to 25 knots in most locations. So get further to the south, getting up to as high as 30 knots there. Then as we move into Thursday, flow once again primarily out of a north or northeasterly direction, 20 to 30 knots. Now strongest as we get further to the south. Seas only getting up to as high as around 10 feet near the Pribilofs. Up along the Arctic coastline, north or northwesterly flow, highest way out east with those blizzard conditions that we are expecting in the morning hours up to as high as 35 knots there. As we look out west in the seas with where we still have some open ocean, we are seeing some freezing spray out there with northerly flow up to as high as 15 knots. As we move into Thursday, flow switching up, becoming more easterly, only around 15 knots. And as we move out over the east, speeds dropping down to around 15 knots there as well, westerly direction. Quick recap over the mainland part of the state. Along the Arctic coastline for tonight, we are going to see those blizzard conditions from Dead Horse further to the east, stopping around midnight. With the exception of way out east along the Beaufort Sea coast, we are going to see those conditions lasting until Wednesday around noontime. Along the west coast of the state, seeing some snow extending down all the way to the Bristol Bay area. Then along the south central, a chance of isolated snow showers throughout the night into the Alaska Range and places near Eagle. Down in the southeast part of the state, some snow expected throughout that area. And as we look way down with our frontal system moving up from the south, rain and snow mix, primarily rain further out towards the central Aleutian Islands. Taking us into Wednesday, that front now extending out into the Gulf of Alaska, bringing rain and snow throughout the Aleutian Islands, becoming snow in the Alaska Peninsula towards Kodiak Island, some snow out over the Bering Sea. As we move up along the coastline, we are going to see some isolated snow showers up to around the Point Hope area and places of the western Brooks Range. Along the eastern parts of the Arctic coast, some snow up there with blowing snow conditions further to the east. And as we move down the eastern part of the state, Fort Yukon and Eagle area is going to see some isolated snow showers with some snow starting to mix with rain in the Panhandle, especially the areas further to the south with warm air coming up from the south. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.